When did Voldemort meet Nagini, and was she in her human form? For a long time, the fandom has just believed that Nagini and Lord Voldemort met sometime after 1981, maybe in an Albanian forest. We know that by 1994, he had met and turned Nagini into a Horcrux, using the murder of Bertha Jorkins. And most of the fandom seems to believe that this initial meeting would be Lord Voldemort meeting Nagini in her snake form. But with all the new information concerning the Fantastic Beasts series, I believe they had a meeting much earlier, and I don't believe that that meeting was by complete chance. I do believe that Nagini was in her human form, or at least able to switch willingly between human and snake. It makes much more sense for Nagini herself to intentionally seek out young Tom Riddle Jr. So I'd like to go over my top 3 theories on how Voldemort met Nagini. The first theory is wild, the second theory has potential, and the third theory might just be the one. So before we start, let's get the facts in order, and there's really only 4 that we need to know. Number 1, Nagini is a Maledictus that was born in Indonesia sometime prior to 1927. Number 2, during the crimes of Grindelwald set in 1927, Nagini forms a bond and a close friendship with Credence Barebone at the Circus Arcanus. Together they flee, and Nagini joins Credence in his quest for self-discovery. At the end of the movie, Credence is persuaded to join Grindelwald, leaving Nagini on her own. She's last seen at Hogwarts. Number 3, 10 years later, in 1937, she does not appear, nor is she mentioned in The Secrets of Dumbledore. And number 4, in the year 1994, she becomes a Horcrux for Lord Voldemort. So from 1927 until 1994, we have no clue what happened to Nagini. That's 76 years where she's just not mentioned. Let me ask you a question. Do you think that a character who was strongly associated with Aurelius Dumbledore, and that was last seen at Hogwarts in the year 1927, just disappeared and had nothing to do with our main characters until she randomly slithers by Lord Voldemort in a creepy Albanian forest in the year 1994? There's no way. Why would J.K. Rowling create such an interesting backstory for Nagini just to have it go nowhere? Nagini is invested in the Dumbledores and their story. She's so involved that I have a totally different theory titled, Did Aurelius Dumbledore and Nagini have a child? But besides that, she was literally last seen at Hogwarts. She's just standing there, and one can clearly assume that she's invited in or perhaps talks with Albus Dumbledore. This leads us to theory number 1. I believe Nagini met Tom Riddle Jr. at Hogwarts or just prior to Tom's first year in 1938. Tom Riddle says to Dumbledore, quote, "I can speak to snakes too. They find me, whisper things. Is that normal for someone like me? Speaking to snakes is one thing, but to say they find me, why are snakes seeking this boy? How did they find him? Snakes just so happen to be finding the heir of Salazar Slytherin? Or perhaps they're being directed to seek the only living heir of Slytherin, the only person that has the power to open the Chamber of Secrets. We all know that Harry Potter can speak to snakes, but they're not seeking him out or trying to find him. Maybe during Nagini's quick tour of the Hogwarts castle in 1927, she's walking down a quiet corridor or using the girls' bathroom on the 2nd floor when she happens to hear or sense the calling of Salazar Slytherin's beast. According to legend, this beast, a very fantastic beast, is sealed in the Chamber of Secrets so that none would be able to open it until his own true heir arrived at the school. Could Nagini, perhaps under the influence or guidance of the King of all Serpents, be seeking out Tom Riddle as a part of a greater plot? Yes. It's definitely possible. She might end up living in Hogsmeade for a few years or find refuge in the Forbidden Forest. She was close to Aurelius Dumbledore, and his father lives in Hogsmeade. Again, the last time that the fandom has seen her, she was at Hogwarts. That's a pretty big deal. She's nowhere near Albania, and she doesn't seem to have a lot of resources. So it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility that Nagini was one of those serpents finding young Tom Riddle. Now, clearly she would have to wait until he was old enough to receive his letter from Professor Dumbledore. And even then, it would take time for young Tom Riddle to fully uncover and understand the mystery of the Chamber of Secrets. As a snake, she would have the ability to help Tom Riddle search the castle. If Sirius, in his animagus form as a black dog, can sneak into Hogwarts, then surely Nagini could infiltrate and explore as needed. In some fashion, I believe it's possible and highly likely that Nagini meets and is involved with Tom Riddle from a very young age. My video on Did Aurelius Dumbledore and Nagini have a child definitely explores this idea further. Be sure to check it out. But it's time to move move on to our next plausible time period for Voldemort to meet Nagini. Theory number 2. I believe it's highly likely that during his tenure at Borgin and Burkes from 1945 until 1955, Tom Riddle met or heard a rumor of a Maledictus living in Great Britain. This was a critical phase in Tom Riddle's life where he was starting to transition into Lord Voldemort. It was during these years that he acquired many dark artifacts and spent much of his time traveling around Great Britain. During those business trips for Borgin and Burke, he hears about a woman who is cursed, a woman who takes the form of a snake. Now by this time, Tom Riddle Jr. already knows that he is Slytherin's heir, and he controls Slytherin's monster. You can guarantee that a beautiful woman who turns into a snake would more than fascinate him. Tom is obsessed with the dark arts, and this woman is cursed. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore had this to say, quote, "I think he is perhaps as fond of her as he can be of anything." Some speculate that Tom Riddle and Nagini had a romantic relationship, but I don't think so. She's much older than the Dark Lord, but clearly Dumbledore believes there is a fondness between these two characters. She seems to have a very protective and motherly nature over the Dark Lord. Peter Pettigrew actually milks her fangs and uses that venom to nurse and keep Baby Mort alive. During his time at Borgin and Burkes, he might have just had an initial meeting with Nagini, something very brief and fascinating. He was too busy acquiring dark artifacts, but he took special note of this woman. Perhaps he wanted to study her more later on and learn more about this curse and the magic behind it. And maybe he promised to help her in exchange for her help in collecting powerful magical artifacts. We just don't know. It's a full 10 years where Tom Riddle is learning and exploring the magical world. A meeting during this time period would not only add depth to Nagini's character, but also further intertwine her fate with Voldemort's dark ambitions. My third and final theory is set between the years of 1957 and 1967. This might be the most likely time where Nagini and Voldemort actually met. During these 10 years, Voldemort wandered the world, sinking deeper and deeper into the dark arts. He met the very worst of wizard kind, and he was undergoing numerous dangers, magical rituals, and transformations that by the time he resurfaced years later, he was barely recognizable, and he seemed to almost have a serpent-like appearance. If my theory number 1 and theory number 2 are incorrect, and Nagini does not stay in Britain, then I would have to assume that by 1927, after suffering the bitter loss of Aurelius Dumbledore and being shunned by local witches and wizards, Nagini decided to return home to Indonesia. What we do know about Lord Voldemort during this time period is that he traveled extensively, to the point that no one, not even his own followers, knew exactly where he went. But I believe that one of the places he traveled to was Indonesia. You see, this country is home to the wizarding world's most robust black market. Jakarta is the capital of Indonesia, and there's numerous trading of dark artifacts, creatures, and ancient spellbooks, and much more. Of course, the Dark Lord wanted to see what they had for sale. This is the perfect time and location for Voldemort to meet and cultivate a relationship with a rare Maledictus who takes the form of a snake. The magic behind the Maledictus curse would have fascinated the Dark Lord, and on Nagini's part, she knows that she is doomed to waste away as a mindless beast. So instead, she chooses purpose, to serve a master of the dark arts and a parcel mouth, someone who could actually speak with her when her change would ultimately become permanent. She may have seen him as a way to retain some sense of identity. And we know Tom Riddle can be persuasive and manipulative. Perhaps she believed that Voldemort's pursuit of immortality could be her salvation as well. She might have even been so desperate that she agreed to take an unbreakable vow. If he could conquer death, then maybe he could also halt her transformation. And for Lord Voldemort as Salazar Slytherin's heir, it would seem only too fitting for him to have a serpent Maledictus as one of his closest followers. But why would she believe this foreigner from afar? He talked about immortality and dark arts, but where was the proof? She would need to prove his power, which is why one could speculate that he left Indonesia and took her to a forest in Albania where he killed a peasant and created his 5th Horcrux right before her very eyes. She literally watches him perform some of the darkest magic in the world. No one, and I mean no one, has ever witnessed the Dark Lord in the act of creating a Horcrux. This would be a great honor. She would either keep this secret or she would die. Voldemort also needs someone to help him reanimate his own body in the event that his first body is defeated and destroyed. Clearly, we know that Lord Voldemort needed the help of Peter Pettigrew and Barty Crouch Jr. in order to acquire a new body. So it makes sense that prior to his rise to power in 1970 and his intention to challenge the wizarding world, that he would think ahead and choose someone like Nagini to be a failsafe. Someone that he could trust to help him regain his former self. Someone that was completely unrelated to his other followers. I believe he intended for Nagini to be that very person. In the event that something does go wrong for Lord Voldemort, it's much better for him to have someone who is separate from his Death Eaters to help resurrect him. He knows that this is a time where he will be most vulnerable, and in order to retain his power and his omnipotent presence, he would choose someone like Nagini who is separate and distant from his main host of followers. He would want to keep the specifics of his return a secret and mysterious, which enhances his overall influence, terror, and mystique. Nagini would have been instructed to wait in or around Albania, or perhaps in the event that she heard that the Dark Lord was defeated, then she knew to return to the very location where she witnessed the Dark Lord create a Horcrux. Either way, they had a plan. She was a part of his contingency, and as an outcast or a misfit, she would be relatively protected in the Albanian forest. Obviously, Voldemort has promised to find a cure for her affliction. No one knows the dark arts better than him. But as the years went by, Voldemort continued to grow in power and he believed that he was unstoppable. By 1981, he had all but forgotten about poor Nagini. And unfortunately, when Voldemort was finally defeated at Godric's Hollow, his spirit used what remaining strength he had to flee back to Albania. He was shocked, and he couldn't believe that his curse had rebounded on him. But his plan had worked. His Horcruxes kept his spirit from leaving this world. But when he finally returned to Albania, he found that Nagini, his trusted servant and most dedicated follower, was no longer able to take her human form. Voldemort needed Nagini, but it was too late. He could possess her as he did with many other creatures, but now he would have to wait many, many years until he found someone suitable to help him attempt his return. What do you think? Which of these three theories do you think is most likely? Could one of them explain how Voldemort met Nagini? Be sure to subscribe for more Harry Potter content.